Hey there, Doug from TauStats. And in continuing our series of understanding how emission is distributed in the Bittensor network, this is the video on the miners and how emission is distributed amongst all of the miners and all of the subnets. Let's go right into it. Real quickly, every 12 seconds, 1 tau is emitted from the network and then gets split up amongst everybody in the network. The first division is amongst the 32 different subnets. We're just going to show that here as a pie chart. So we can imagine that subnet 8 gets 10%, 0.1 tau every 12 seconds. Inside each subnet, we've got validators, miners, subnet owners, and folks who have delegated or staked tau to the validators. In this video, we'll focus just on the miners, but the first division inside a subnet is 18% to the subnet owner, and then a 50-50 split of the remaining 82% to the miners and the validators. Now, little side here. When you're mining on the Bittensor network, every single subnet is different. And one way to find out about the different hardware requirements, some subnets require a CPU, some require GPUs, some require in-depth machine learning knowledge, some require a lot of storage if you're on the storage subnet. If you want to learn more about that, we do our best to keep an up-to-date list at the TauStat docs, which you can find at docs.taustats.io. But we're here not to talk about how to mine, but what the emission is and how to measure that for all of your miners. This is a screenshot of a metagraph from TauStats. And you can see it's a really long chart. I had to actually break the screenshot into two so you could see it all onto one screen with big text. If you're worried about emissions, the column you want to look at is the incentive. Incentive is built on by the consensus and the trust using the UMA consensus and the incentive mechanism for your subnet. Some subnets utilize trust, some don't. The incentive mechanism is different for all of the different subnets. You can investigate that by digging around in the GitHub and learning how that is created. But incentive is essentially a percentage. So this column for all of the miners is going to add up to 1. And from that incentive, we can figure out an emission. And the emission is the amount of tau that each miner receives. Another way you can visualize incentive across all of the miners in a subnet is through the distribution chart. And what you can see here is the orange are miners that are still have immunity. And by having immunity, that means they just started and they're given a little bit of time to get situated in the network and establish themselves, because the miner with the lowest active key is the one that's going to be deregistered when a new miner registers. So you want your incentive to be high because obviously that's more tau rewards. But if you're down here near the bottom, or if your miner has issues and ends up down here near the bottom, you're also likely to be deregistered, which is clearly not ideal. Let's walk through a sample with just 9 miners just to make it simple. We're going to say that this subnet, the miners every block receive 0.041 tau. I've made up some incentive numbers. And so these incentive numbers would theoretically add up to 1 across all 200 miners. And so to figure out the emission, it's because it's a percentage, it's literally just math, right? It's the tau distributed amongst all the miners times the percentage gives you the emission. Now, this is displayed differently in different places that you look inside the Bittensor network. If you use the metagraph from the command line interface, the emission is shown in RAU, which is 1/1000th of a tau. So instead of 0.00041, you're going to get 4100, a bunch of zeros, right? Because you're just moving the decimal place over 9 places. If you look in TauStats, you're going to see this emission with the P. It's probably a Greek P. And what this is per epoch. And an epoch is 360 blocks. And the reason we do that is just it's a nicer number. There's fewer zeros. It fits nicer on a chart. But the number is exactly the same. If you just take the numbers in the emission column and multiply times 360, you'll get the emission P number. Pretty straightforward. The last thing you might, and so here's how you would see that in TauStats. Here's your incentive. Here's your emission with the P. Now, a lot of times I am asked questions about the daily reward in tau, the daily tau. And really what that is that's the emission P. There are 20 epochs in a day. So if you take this 0.04196 and multiply it times 20, you're going to get this 0.839 with surrounding error because there's more decimal places here than we show on the chart. The daily cash, the daily dollar amount, is literally just this number right here multiplied by the current value of tau. So it's a snapshot. It's an instantaneous number. You'll never actually get that exact value during the day because the value of tau is changing over time. Your emission is changing over time, but it's a nice snapshot to sort of see where you stand, and you can track that over the days and see how that changes up or down. The total number right here is the amount of tau staked to your hotkey. And over here, this is rounded to just an integer. So this one has 2. These all have a fraction, but it's less than 0.5, so it rounds down to 0. And you just multiply the tau staked to that hotkey times the current price of tau, and that's how you get this total dollar amount. So just so you can read that in the tau stats metagraph and understand what they mean as a part of understanding the emissions for your miner. If you've got a lot of miners and they're all connected to the same cold key, you can actually track those by going to taustats.io/cold key and then $cold key equals and put in your cold key, and it will list all of the hotkeys that are registered, and so you can track all of them at once. They'll be organized by subnet, so if you reuse a hotkey across several subnets, you can track it that way as well. When you're a miner, you want to look at as much data as possible to make sure that you're doing the best you can and that your miner is growing and gaining incentive the way you expect it to. And TauStats is a great free community-driven tool to help you do that and help you visualize where you stand in the network at any given time. So check out taustats.io if you haven't already. If you have questions, feel free to join our Discord, leave a comment below. We're here to help the Bittensor community grow and become successful.